Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you joining us today for another amazing episode of the Nonprofit Show. Today we have Shari Smith with us, talking with us about turning data into action. So we're excited to dive deep with you into this evaluation conversation. Thanks to Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, we continue to move and groove with these episodes well into our 360s, plural now, well above that. So really excited. I'm Jarrett Ransom with a frog in my throat. I'm also the nonprofit nerd CEO of the Raven Group, and always join Julia, or mostly join Julia here for these shows, and really excited to continue to be of service. So extremely grateful to each and every one of our presenting sponsors. Without you, we would not be moving and grooving with these amazing conversations. When we started these, Julia, March of last year, I think we both said it's really a labor of love to get up and do this. But these sponsors allow us each and every day to have these high-level conversations and truly put our finger on the pulse of the nonprofit sector. So thank you to our sponsors. And back to Shari. Again, welcome so much. Shari Smith is the president and founder of Evaluation into Action. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, Shari, I gotta say, you are involved in one of the more, I'm just gonna say it, less sexy aspects of what we need to be doing. But I think you're probably at the core of decision-making for so many, for funders, for collaborators, for, all these different things. And yet you're so, misunderstood within this profession. And I'm really interested to know how you came about this, because this is not a typical drill down within the nonprofit sector.
So how I came into program evaluation and what it's all about, I think you're right. I think it's a very misunderstood. I think it stems from the reasons of why people dive into doing program evaluation at all, is usually it feels it is mandated by funders, right? So when you're told you have to do something, think about it like you have to eat your vegetables, but I don't really want to. You don't understand the why. Can you tell I have kids? You don't understand the why, right? So it's really important to shift the mindset of why we do program evaluation, because at its core, it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity to gather data in a systematic, formal way to understand if you're truly making the difference you intend on making. At its core, what it's all about is what is going well, so we can demonstrate the impact we're making, and where are improvements needed, so we can use data for continuous, ongoing program improvement.
Oh my gosh. So for a subject that is not sexy, right? Or typically not sexy, I don't know. I mean, that sounds really robust. And we're also going to talk a little bit today about a newly released book. I think you published a book and it came out in January. Is that correct?
That's correct. Nonprofit Program Evaluation Made Simple. Get your data, show your impact, and improve your programs. It's all about making program evaluation accessible to the non-evaluator, because I'm really passionate about getting it out there so people can do this work. Because too often people feel overwhelmed with where to start, or if it's mandated by funders, like what do I even need to be doing? And this book really drills down the process in a way that makes it accessible to the non-evaluator.
So let me ask you this question. Are you finding that funders, foundations, people that are looking to make investments are looking at your information and wanting to work with you so that you could then get nonprofits up to speed, or is it going the other way? Because
that's a great question, Julia. It kind of goes both ways.
Yeah.
I've worked with both funders and foundations as well as nonprofit organizations in both capacities. And one of the things I seek to do is to help with that power dynamic, right? Of putting nonprofits in the driver's seat of the data that they're collecting rather than funders mandating it. And the foundations that I've worked with are very receptive to that. Let's make it a collaborative process. If you get my book, Nonprofit Program Evaluation Made Simple, I talk so much about collaboration, because it is so important to collaborate organization-wide to define the difference you expect to be making. I think that's the real stumbling block that people get to, right? We have to define our impact, but what does that mean? You know, in fundraising, the grant writers put that into the proposals, right? They put those outcomes in the proposals. Here's how we're measuring success or defining success. But sometimes, and you guys, please let me know your experience. I think sometimes my observation is they put those in to secure funds without necessarily talking to program staff about gathering the data that they're promising into the grant proposal. Super common in my experience. What have you guys seen?
I'm going to, agree with you. It's very common. My two main wheelhouses, fundraising and strategy. And so I am by no way, shape, or form like a specialist in program evaluation. However, I do see the deep importance of using it to help tell the story and to help share the impact, right? And I've worked with so many organizations, some new, some with newer programs that don't have the evaluation, or they don't have the metrics to even evaluate quite yet. So I'm curious how your book might talk about, you know, an organization based off of a program that is established and one that's brand new, and there is no, you know, set KPIs, if you will. So, but yes, back to your question, I would agree. It's often kind of done in this vacuum, you know, filling in the blanks for the funder, but not really eliciting or collaborating, back to that word, with the program team to ensure that the data that, you know, the program team is tracking is what you're also reporting on. So I would say that there's a misconnect there.
Yes.
You know, I think that there's, you know, we all know chasing money. I mean, I think so many organizations are so, you know, they're so desperate for the money. They'll be like, well, yeah, how hard can that be? We'll add that on, or we'll do this. And then it just creates a lot of problems because you can't meet the expectations.
That's right.
Set.
That's right.
So you said something really interesting.
Okay.
And that is going back, and maybe I heard you incorrectly, but it's okay for a nonprofit to go back to that funder and just say, you know what? I don't think we can do this, or we don't have the bandwidth, or this might be a challenge, but could we do this? And I think that's what's missing with this relationship between funders and nonprofits. They're so fearful of coming forward and being less than positive or capable or addressing shortcomings that they have, that they dig a hole for themselves and ultimately create an environment that damages those relationships with those funders, because they'll never be able to manifest all of the demands that these funders set forth.
Oh my goodness, Julia, I have like just competing thoughts to come out. So I'm going to just talk and see what happens. Okay. So in terms of the funder and putting the nonprofit in the driver's seat, right? So when you put the nonprofit in the driver's seat and you collaboratively create a plan internally, right? So that everybody is on board with, hey, here's how we're all defining impact. So grant writers, you put these outcomes in, and you know, with confidence, program staff are gathering data around those outcomes. You have to have alignment and agreement with everybody, right? So by doing that, nonprofits are standing an expert, right? Because they are the experts, right, on what they're doing. And then, you know, instead of running from that fear, I really encourage you to run to it, right? Be brave, be vulnerable. All right. I love Brene Brown. I'm going to quote her. Be vulnerable, get into it, get curious, because at the end of the day, don't you want to actually make sure you are making the difference you intend to be making? So the way you get over things like the fear or the, I don't want to report. And if we're not like a straight A student, I don't want to share it. The way to get over that is to look at what's not working, create a written improvement plan, right? Here's what we discovered. Here's what we're going to do differently, and here's what we're going to measure again. When you do that and you share that with your funder, that is a game. I'm not going to guarantee it, so don't come back to me and say Shari said, but I've never had a funder or a client or a nonprofit have that go badly, right? It's always been like, we have our learning. We're a thriving and learning organization. You have to fail in order to learn. I don't think that's a new concept. It's been said a million different ways by a million different people, right? And that's what program evaluation allows you to do. It helps you define the impact you expect to make, right? Collaboratively, gather data around those outcomes, and then ultimately report out honestly and transparently. Here's what went well. So you're demonstrating impact, and here's where we need to improve. And here's our improvement plan to get there, right? But the key, I think, is to have that plan in place. So when the funder is asking for the data, they have those questions, the grant writer can turn around and say, we have this evaluation plan in place. Will this fulfill your needs? Because my experience has been foundations are like, fantastic that you have a plan. Sure, because they're not expecting that. But I think the more nonprofits that can understand the value that program evaluation brings to them, the better that they're going to be able to sit in that driver's seat, right? Stand an expert and say, this is what we do. This is how we're going to measure our success. And we'll share it back with you.
Right.
That is so critical. And for something, as we said, is not sexy, a written improvement plan sounds really good to me. And really getting ahead of the problem. And again, to quote Brene Brown, many of us are in the arena. We are, the nonprofits, the leaders that are in the arena. And so when COVID hit, many clients maybe saw a decrease in the amount of individuals they were able to serve. Not all, but some saw a decrease in the quantity, right? But they went deeper with those individuals, which actually shifted their evaluation and their impact numbers. And I've heard that on a couple occasions, Shari, from clients of mine here in my community. How does your book or how does your expertise really talk about when something like COVID happens and there's this complete pivot and shift in how we do what we do? What are your best practices, to talk about that?
Right. So that's a great question. So when something happens, what I like to do is help to build capacity in doing program evaluation work, right? So I'm all about being an evaluation guide, and the people I work with are content experts, right? So I build capacity so they eventually don't need me at all, right? So in terms of like when COVID hit, my experience was when I reached out to former clients just to check in, see how they're doing. They had built that evaluative thinking muscle. So they were right away creating a survey or creating focus groups or creating data collection opportunities to get feedback from their participants. How do we pivot? So they're not in a vacuum and they're not in crisis. Oh my goodness, what should we be doing? We need to get right away, like the reflex reaction. I was so excited to hear this one, is we need to gather data. We need to gather data and know what to do next. I actually have on my website, evaluationintoaction.com, there's a blog, and I featured In for All, which is one of my clients. They're also one of the clients that are included in my book. I'm just going to give them a shout out because there are 4 of my clients that generously gave permission to share their internal processes and documents. And that's what's in my book, Nonprofit Program Evaluation Made Simple. So I spotlighted on them on how they responded to the pandemic. And it's that story I just shared of, okay, what data do we need? What do we need to collect to understand how to adapt our program for this new environment? So it takes the panic out of panicking.
That's so good. Which then you can't spell panicking if
I guess so. I said that. I'm like, sorry, that's not working. As it came out of my mouth, I was hoping I could grab the words back. I'm like, come back. That doesn't work.
Okay. I totally get it. No, it's good. We should share, but before we went live, both Shari and I shared this commonality that we're both thespians. So we have theatrical, experience in our life. So we're really just kind of, impromptu. There's no script for any of us. So it's really a fun conversation. I love that because I feel too often, Shari, many of us, regardless of sector, we are so reactive as opposed to
yes, we are.
effective. And so these elements and best practices of your book really help us to identify, okay, there is a shift. What action do I need to take to get ahead of that? So I know I myself can't wait to get my hands on your book.
Oh, thank you.
Shari, I'm really interested, just in general, do you think that nonprofits are actually working towards understanding data and making that a part of their ecosystem? I mean, you said something really interesting to me that, when the pandemic occurred and all these shifts were going about, you could see a delineation between those that already got the practice and had the mindset to use these tools versus those that didn't. I mean, Jarrett and I, in the very beginning, this whole show was started because of COVID. I mean, it was something that was generated from this situation. But the number of people and institutions, some very large, that told us, we're hitting the pause button. We're just going to sit tight. And then when it's all over, we'll come back. Versus those that were like, hell no, we got to lean in. And, it was such a divergent thing. And so I'm kind of curious if you could track some of this back to the use of data.
Well, I think that understanding how to use data, right? I think if you have a formal program evaluation system in place, then you are set up for using data to make decisions, as well as to demonstrate impact, right? I think if you don't have that formal system in place, I think a lot of people, like we talked about earlier, are intimidated or afraid or feel like it's going to be a burden to set up such a system. But I can't tell you how many times I've gone through that process, and there's generally at least one or two staff members that are like, they're like, greet me like this, and they're like not interested at all. But once they realize it's a collaborative process, their voice matters at the table, we're making decisions together on what data to collect and why to gather them, that is an absolute game changer, right? So I think that really when people are committed to setting up that system and willing to set it up, that is when you really change the game, right? But if they're not willing, there are, and I see that a lot. And that's where a big stumbling block. You have to be willing to shift your mindset. But I think it comes from back to what we talked about. People are afraid, they don't think that they need it, and so on and so on. But there's so much empowerment to have from having a formal program evaluation system in place, right?
What are some of the systems that you recommend? Because I know there's the good old pen and paper, and then there's an evolution into an Excel document, or, different systems. Did your book go into that, or can you perhaps go into?
Absolutely, it goes into that. And so by system, I mean, not just the database and the physical technology system. I mean, the entire system of the people and who's gathering the data and what they're gathering and when, and all of those components, right?
The system.
The whole system, right? So thanks for clarifying that word. I do have an entire chapter, though, dedicated to how to manage your program data, right? There's so much out there for managing your donors and your fundraising, right? There's not as much out there on managing your program data in a way so you're not up at 2 a.m. trying to pull data from an Excel spreadsheet. Well, raise your hand if that's been you. So, so that's easily avoided.
I know.
Yeah, both hands.
That's easily avoided. I do go into that, and I talk about that, how to avoid the 2 a.m. report writing in my book, Nonprofit Program Evaluation Made Simple. It lays it all out. I just want to share this real quick about the book because it was exciting to me. I met with a professor, Dr. Shanat Parker, and she is at Lander University, and she's going to use my book in her undergraduate course. So any
my alma mater?
Serious?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So she's going to use it as a textbook because she wanted something more user-friendly. And what she said to me was that my book takes the fear out of doing program evaluation. And my heart just melted when she said that, because I'm like, success. I mean, that's how I measure the success of my book, right? If people feel like they can access it and understand how to do it, then I feel like I've been successful in that. So, but to get to your question about the systems and whatnot, I want to share this little example. I do have it written out because I don't have everything my clients have done memorized, but I do want to share this with you. We've been talking a lot about the alignment of setting up a system of collaborating. And I want to give you a very brief example. This example is in a lot more detail in my book. But this is again with In for All, and they have a STEM Connect program. Okay. And what this program does is bring STEM volunteers from local businesses to do a specific curriculum in 4th and 5th grade classrooms, get kids excited about STEM. So here's the process, 3 steps. Define your outcome, right? Which people are like, I don't know how to do that collaboratively. I'm going to tell you. Gather your data, right? And then report it out. Okay, got to align those 3 steps. So like whatever you're putting in your grant proposal, that's what you're actually gathering and reporting out. So one of their outcomes is to increase the interest in STEM related careers. 2, okay, the data we gathered, we did a pre and post survey with 4th grade students. We asked questions like strongly agree to strongly disagree. A job in science is interesting to me. I want to learn about different jobs in science. A job in science is boring. It's like, I'm going super fast. This is just a little excerpt from the survey. So don't email me later and be like, well, why didn't you ask? Okay, this is a little bit about the survey.
Right.
3rd step is the impact, reporting it out. So they were able to report out the numbers and the story. So you have the quantitative data and the qualitative data together, right? So you have a mixed method, right? So one piece of data, 94 students that had a negative or neutral interest in science in the pre-survey increased their interest in science-related careers. Stories, couple of quotes. When I grow up, I want to be a vet that includes math and science, or I would love to have a job in science when I grow up. And those statements came from because of participating in this program, what has changed for you kind of thing. So that was so fast, I know, but basically I wanted to show you the alignment. I mean, if you want to see that full report, it is on the portfolio page of my website, so you can check it out there. But that gives you like your outcome, define your impact collaboratively, right? And then gather the data around that outcome and then report it out. So those 3 steps, and that I go into so much more detail in my book. Specifically, I have a formula in there on how to create measurable outcomes.
So I love what you're saying, and it's really pulled a lot of this journey together for us. But I want to ask the deep, question, and that is, how expensive is this? Because in the nonprofit world, we're always worried about that bottom line and something that you can't physically see at first. Might be a daunting aspect. And I know with grant review situations, a lot of times people are looking at this and saying, it's going to cost me so much money to abide by the terms of this grant. Mm-hmm. In the long run, we won't recoup this. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that? How do you navigate that?
Well, I actually think that, a couple of different things. First is a common guideline. And I just want to say, disclaimer, I did not make this up. It comes from the evaluation community, but 10 to 15% of your operating budget for your program should be dedicated to program evaluation work. Now, that means part of the FTE of someone internally, they are charged, usually the program director is charged with doing the evaluation work. You could also hire someone externally like myself to come in and do the evaluation work, but it can be anywhere in between. You can pull someone in like myself, and I do this a lot, of creating the program evaluation plan, but then the implementation of that plan and ongoing gathering of the data is done internally. So it can be a combination of internal and external, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure you've set aside some money in your budget so it's a part of the program, not an add-on of like, oops, it's, we have a funder report due in 2 weeks. How do we get 2 years worth of data? So you want to make sure that you have that planned out. But I do want to do another little reading for you. I have this quote from a client who shared with me how setting up a program evaluation system really impacted their fundraising capacity. So to your question, Julia, about making this investment and is it going to really be worth it in the long run? And I honestly come to program evaluation with the mindset of it's a learning opportunity, right? It's not a marketing activity. It's not a PR activity. It's not a fundraising activity, but it can complement and support those things. So this is Brandy Tuck. She is with Portland Homeless Family Solutions. She's their executive director. Also one of the 4 organizations included in my book. So a little story time. Here's what she said. Because of having this program evaluation system in place, our annual fundraising from foundations increased by 677%. I know, jaw drop, right? That's what I did. Wow. And annual fundraising from individual donors increased by 753%. So if you're wondering what did they do when I met them in 2013, they were only tracking outputs, or just bean counting, how many people are being served, which historically was okay to do for funders, not anymore, right? So we worked a lot on understanding the impact they were making on everybody's lives, like it with the goal of ending homelessness with these families. But what happens leading up to that goal? What is the impact that occurs? Once they were able to really articulate that, right? We went through that collaborative process and gather data around those outcomes and then report them out. That's what changed their capacity in fundraising.
Okay, so I know I wasn't the only one whose eyes got like enormous.
Mine did too. When she told me that, I was like, what? Yes.
Oh, that is unheard of. I have a sneaking suspicion, Shari, that so many people are going to want to know how they can implement some of these practices. You mentioned, so of course you have a book, and that is available for all of you watching. That will also be added to our book of list. Is it our book club on the AmericanNonprofitAcademy.com? And you also have a workshop coming up. Could you tell us about that?
You bet. So on Thursday, October 21st at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm doing a workshop, Program Evaluation Made Simple, where I'm going to really go through in about an hour, like the basics of how to get started on doing program evaluation work in your organization. So please join me. You can go to my website. The link to register is right there on the homepage at evaluationintoaction.com.
What is the date again?
It is Thursday, October 21st, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay. So if any of you miss our show, we will assume that you're at Shari's workshop and we'll be watching our archive, our recording. This is fantastic. And the book, so again, it'll be added, correct, Julia, to the website?
Yeah, probably up today. Yeah. So you'll be able to access that. Shari, this has been really great. I have to say that my sense of it is, from talking to funders, is that they're going to really start to implement more of these reporting techniques. And they're not looking for, rainbows and unicorns, that it's all good. But the problem has been to communicate this to the nonprofits is that don't work from fear, work with us so that we can navigate some solutions. And we're not going to always hit a home run.
Right.
Now, there will be times when we're like, wow, that didn't work. Okay. Yep. Fail fast, move on, let's go.
That's right.
So I think that this is really a valuable discussion to have, and really, really thrilled that we could have you on today and talk about
it's been a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Shari, remind me, what was that? It was the written something report. I want to write it down.
Oh, if people want to go check out the report that I was talking about earlier.
Well, I was thinking of, so if we don't have the numbers, it's the corrective kind of action of like, here's what we are doing to take steps towards achieving the results. And you said it was like a written.
Improvement plan.
Improvement plan.
Yeah, right. An improvement plan. And I have a lot more detail about doing that in my book too.
Of course. Awesome. Well, it's been great. Jared and I are always so inspired by the guests we have on. I got to say, you're ranking up there pretty high, sister.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I feel like we could talk for a couple hours about program evaluation. It's so much fun.
Well, we have not until now really had a dedicated episode on program evaluation. And I really think it's important. I know you think it's important too, Julia. So this is really why, we really wanted to have you on. We'd love to get you on again, because as everything continues to change, really looking at how we are telling our impact. And you had said earlier, it's not just numbers, it's the story. So how we can best do that is really, really critical during these times. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to connecting again soon in the future.
Yes.
Well, we will definitely have some more questions, and I know our viewers will as well. As we end up today's episode, we certainly want to make sure that we thank all of our presenting sponsors. Without you, we would not be here having this robust discussion. And so we express our tremendous gratitude for allowing us to do this each and every day. And as Jarrett mentioned, we're into our 360 something episode count. So 364. Whew, I need a
Wow,
vacation.
congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. So never a dull moment, as we like to say. Hey, everybody, this has been another great episode. We're so honored that you would take your valuable time and spend it with us. We want to remind everyone to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here tomorrow, everyone.